Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Called2B Podcast, where we seek to empower everyday believers to discover and live out their authentic calling in Christ. I'm Reverend Dr. Travis Guzzi. I'm the Executive Director of Wellness and Coaching for the Southeastern District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I'm also an ICF Certified Life and Executive Coach and a Gallup Strengths Coach. And it is wonderful having you join us for this once-a-month everyday believer conversation, where we have conversations with everyday believers doing extraordinary things in the kingdom. And today we have a special treat for all of you, as today we are having a conversation with Team Soloman, and we're going to be talking about Comfort Dog Ministry. But before we invite you to join us and meet our guests for today, I do want to encourage all of you, besides listening and viewing to this podcast, we'd like to also encourage you to like and share. Make sure to subscribe as well to our YouTube channel. It just helps with the algorithms so that more people can see this podcast and be blessed by it. And with that, welcome Team Soloman. In studio, we have Trish Freshwater. You should all know Trish really well, as she's one of our co-hosts for the Called2B Podcast. And we also have Phil Forget. Forget. I do apologize. I'm not the best with names. And by the way, if you see some fidgeting going on, we also have Soloman, the comfort dog, who is under the table. We're going to be introducing you to him a little bit later. Anyway, Phil and Trish, great to have you here for this Everyday Believer conversation today.
It is great to be here and share lots of information about my most favorite canine in the whole wide world. Soloman is our comfort dog here at King of Glory Lutheran Church, and he's amazing. He's probably the greatest gift that we have to offer to our community.
That's wonderful. So let's start off for our listening and viewing audience who may not be familiar with this kind of ministry. What is a comfort dog ministry?
So a comfort dog is much like a service dog or a therapy dog, but they don't really meet those qualifications. So a service dog is usually tied one dog to one person. A therapy dog usually comes into group settings and provides some sort of therapy for the individuals that they meet with. As a comfort dog, we come in to help those who may be going through a challenging time. They may be going through a loss. They may be going through a difficult personal situation, or they may just need some extra love in their life. And so we bring Soloman in not just to visit with those who are sick or elderly, but we can also visit with veterans and first responders. We also go into the schools and we try to just share God's love with everyone that Soloman meets.
That's wonderful. Well, good. So how did the both of you get involved in Comfort Dog Ministry, and how did King of Glory find out about this?
I guess I'll start the story and then I'll pass it to Philip. So I moved to Williamsburg in 2018.
Okay.
And shortly after that, found King of Glory, and I'm going to say very tongue-in-cheek, made the mistake of asking Pastor Harmon at the time, hey, I was very involved in our church back in South Carolina. What could I do here? I'd love
Always
something to do.
Always a dangerous question to ask, right?
It is. So he passed me on to Tara Wolf, who was our Outreach Ministries pastor, and we had a wonderful conversation, and she said, so I understand you like animals. And I was like, yes, but what does that have to do with church? And so then she explained that they had applied for a comfort dog through Lutheran Church Charities and asked if I would be interested in leading this ministry for the church. Spent some time praying on it and thinking about it, and ultimately decided, yes, absolutely, this would be amazing. Of course, then COVID hit, and our dog assignment was delayed just a little bit because the dogs go through a bunch of training through Lutheran Church Charities back in Chicago. And so it took some time for us to get Soloman. We probably were delayed about a year, but we are thrilled to have him now. And I have an amazing team, of which Philip is going to be our representative today, and they do wonderful things.
Yeah. And Philip, how did you get ringed into all of this?
So I've been at King of Glory about, I guess, almost 5 years now. And I had been involved heavily in a mercy ministry at a prior church, and had been a mercy ministry chair, and really enjoyed, bringing that comfort in a way to people that were in need. And so when I came to the church, my wife and I were sort of looking for something like that. And about a year in or so, we heard about the Comfort Dog Ministry, and as Trish said, it was a little bit delayed because of the COVID in terms of receiving a dog and getting training. My wife had really wanted a dog. I had always grown up.
Here's a good way to be around dogs without owning one.
Yeah, well, the thing about the comfort dog, like I'm a handler, so the dog does not stay with me on a consistent basis. There's a primary caregiver in New Kent County, and that's where mostly Soloman stays. So I have a dog, the best kind of dog. So he's kind of like a grandkid. You can turn him back over to the parents.
Right. So you love on him and do his things. And Solomon's a little active right now, so we're adjusting. Yeah. So as King of Glory has entered into this comfort dog ministry, you both have gotten involved. Now that you get a comfort dog, what kind of ministry engagements does Soloman do kind of day in and day out with the ministry of King of Glory? I know you kind of talked about some things in general, but if you could kind of maybe paint the picture in a little more detail for us.
Sure. So our goal is to do outreach within the entire community. So at King of Glory, for those who don't know, our mission is to share the love of Jesus with everyone. And so that ties very nicely to the mission for Lutheran Church Charities Comfort Dogs, in that they want to share Jesus's love through the dogs as a bridge towards healing, towards many different opportunities. And so we are able to go into senior living facilities. We go into schools. We have done recently, we were working with a family on a court case. It was a child abuse situation. So we were working with the young lady to ensure that she felt ready to go to court. We also can do bigger things. And so sometimes we will go on a deployment. So recently, a number of teams went up to Maine
with the shooting up in the community up there.
To support that community there. We had hoped to go, but we had some scheduling challenges and just weren't able to go. And so it was mixed feelings. We really wish we could have been there. But certainly I'm proud of the teams that were there. But here locally, some folks may remember about a year or so ago, there was the shooting at the Chesapeake Walmart, and we did go down there for that. And we've been to some other things at UVA as well. And so we can do what we call a larger deployment and go someplace where there is a great need for comfort to come to a community, so that we can be that bridge towards healing for those who are in need at the time.
And just for example, in the last week, I've been with Soloman to the New Kent Social Services Center, where he worked with staff and kind of moved around. And we did an Alzheimer's Association walk with him, so he does some mercy walks and things like that, fundraisers and stuff. And then I'm trying to think. A nursing home. I did Verena Nursing Home this week. So a lot of times he has certain commands that he can use in those rises where he'll go up on a bed, or he'll do laps across folks that might be, just seated or in a wheelchair. So he's had, just in this last week, 3 different opportunities to provide comfort to folks in the local area. And last year, we unfortunately, there's incidents all the time, and as Trish said, we did the Chesapeake shooting at the Walmart. We were down there for that, but also my wife and I had gone to a police funeral in Salisbury, Maryland last year. Unfortunately, an officer had lost his life in the line of duty, and we were at that funeral. So he's had quite a few events in the last year and a half, 2 years that we've had him. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's kind of local ministry kind of engagements of kind of care events, but it also can be kind of national tragedies where people are needing some comfort. There's grieving and ministry to be done.
There is, but there's also the fun aspect. So I don't want to paint the picture that it's only for those who are going through difficult times. So especially when we visit preschools and elementary schools, there's lots of opportunity there just for fun engagement with Soloman, and to help build up some camaraderie and other fun things within the classroom. So our team has read books to the younger children. We also have an opportunity for older children if their teacher would like to do a writing assignment, so they can write letters to Soloman. No one's taken us up on it yet, but we have some writers ready to respond from Soloman, should anybody want to do that. And then we've also done a geography.
I bet his penmanship is awesome, right?
Yeah. Perfect penmanship. And then
we had that geography lesson
I was gonna
last
say,
year. So we've done a lot of public schools, and I brought him into schools with different PAW partners, and we actually did like lessons on geography, like where the different dogs were at, as a way of sort of teaching United States, that type of thing. And it was, we once went into a kindergarten. We didn't do the lesson there, but we went in and we had brought the dog in, put him on the floor, and had all the kids around him. And I couldn't figure out why he kept trying to do like an army crawl to get toward the chairs. And usually the paw partner is a person who goes in with you, and they sort of look ahead. And so they're trying to see if there's like crackers on the ground or little things, paper that he might want to eat. You know, you want to keep that away from him. But he kept trying to do this dog crawl. And it finally hit me that every single chair in the place, every leg, the teacher had put tennis balls on the bottom so they wouldn't scratch the floor.
So he was one of the balls.
Oh yeah, you just put him in a room full of tennis balls. So.
Right, because as much as he's trained and he's a comfort dog, he's still a dog, right?
He is still a dog, yes.
So what is the reaction? So you walk in with Soloman, whether it's kind of more the fun engagements, maybe some more mourning and tragedy. What is the reaction when you walk in the room with Soloman?
Well, it's honestly just joy. I mean, people, the minute they see him, it's an amazing thing because the joke is he's just a dog, but he's not. You know, when he comes in, it's you know, his Bible verse, which I have out, he's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also said eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. It's Ecclesiastes 3:11. And that no one can fathom, you can't fathom. When he goes in the room, the reactions are just so, there's no judgment in Soloman. Kind of, you know, yes, there's judgment in other, but he's a dog, and it's just pure love. And so I always see it as an extension of the Creator's love for his creations. And people might be hurting, they might not be, but everybody gets joy from him, and it makes his day. I've seen principals from elementary schools just sit with him for long amounts of time. And I've seen people grieving who just lean into him. They don't say anything, but it's doing something for them. And I always feel like God is working through his creation here to comfort those souls. So.
Yeah. And it sounds like it also gives you some open doors to be able to have some ministry conversations from that engagement.
100%. And that's Solomon's job, is to be that bridge to the ministry, to healing, to maybe greater joy in that moment for that individual. One of my favorite stories is when one of the handlers, our team will often practice at places like Lowe's and Home Depot and other places. And someone came to a meeting a while back and said it was the funniest thing. We were there, and this young boy was hollering across the entire store, "Mommy, Mommy, it's Soloman." And the mom was like, "What are you talking about? Child, come this way." And she's like, No, I need to go see Soloman. And so it was kind of cool to hear from our team, when they're out in public, people start to recognize him. So we had obviously visited that child's classroom and made a great impression on him.
That's awesome.
To me, that's the cool part, is when people start to recognize him in the community and they're like, "Oh, look, there's that Soloman dog."
That's cool. So let me ask you, so to get involved in Comfort Dog ministry, both as a congregation and as individuals, what's the training that goes into it for you as the handlers, but also for Soloman the dog or any other comfort dog?
Well, first, Trish as sort of the top dog, which is her title.
That's a nice title.
Top dog.
Sort of crazy.
Have you got that on your business cards?
I actually do have a business card with that title on it. I prefer ministry lead, but...
So as the ministry lead, she had to go to some training herself before the rest of the team. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
So Lutheran Church Charities does formal training for everybody who leads the ministry or is a handler or caregiver. And it's about a 2 to 3 day training course, and you meet up with other teams who are either adding a new team lead or they are adding new handlers to their team. And so I went through the initial training to learn about the ministry, the expectations, how we can live up to their standards, and also consistency. Consistency is an incredibly important thing when you're working with a dog. So there's close to like 130 dogs across the country. And so if we were to all go on one deployment, we need to ensure that the dogs are all understanding the same commands, the same expectations, the same behaviors. And so we are all trained the same way.
And how many did you say, how many comfort dogs are there?
Roughly 130.
130, wow.
In 27 states.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's amazing to be part of such a big ministry, and to launch it locally. So I went through that training, but then once we had assembled our team, all of our handlers had to go through training. And so then Philip and the rest of the team went to Chicago as well for, it was about 2 or 3 days of training there.
So our group, the handlers, went to Chicago, and we also had the folks that were considered like caregivers. So you have a primary caregiver where the dog stays most of the time. And then secondary caregivers, obviously when that person might go on a vacation or have things that, so or we have an event that might be closer to where the other person lives, we might have the dog with them for a while. So the caregivers and the handlers go to Chicago, where Lutheran Church Charities is at, and we spend several days, fairly intense, early morning, fairly late at night, doing the commands. And there's a dog for every team member. So, and how does that happen? Because they always have dogs in training.
Right.
So even if the dogs aren't going to be placed anytime soon, they're used by the teams that come into Chicago to train. Now, Soloman was there, and we were told, I think it was like a day in.
Second day.
That he's going to be our dog. And we were very excited about that because Soloman is unique. I went to a conference with my wife in Chicago where they had over 100 of these dogs. And, not that we were biased, but he's one of the better ones.
We are biased, and it's okay to be biased.
I think he's got the fluffiest ears of any comfort dog. Sorry, we love all comfort dogs, but Solomon's pretty special.
We're pretty happy with him. But it's very intense training, and you go through, all the different commands, and you're working with him. But then at some point, about halfway through, you begin to go out with him too. So they would take us to police stations, fire stations, things like that, to try to give us practical experience. And again, they're trying to do this in several days, and so it's very intense. And then what happens is when we came back from Chicago, we work with them, and we're expected to work with them, every week. Whether we go out or not with them, we're expected to go train with them every week. So every week I work with them.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks, I guess maybe a month or so after we were back from Chicago, they send a person from Lutheran Church Charities to the church, and they essentially certify, for lack of a better word, each handler. So they will go with you to a place like Lowe's or, some local business.
Kind of watch you, observe
and
you.
Make you go through all the commands, make sure that you're kind of following what you had learned in Chicago. And in the interim period, I believe when we did this, we were sending videos back too. So we would take videos of ourselves. We'd send them back and get critiques from the people in Chicago.
Yeah. So if a ministry were thinking, hey, we'd like to maybe get in on this comfort dog, sounds like a great way to engage with the community, to be able to be the presence of Jesus, both in some wonderful celebrations, but also trying times. What should they... there's that Bible verse, before you build a tower, count the cost. Before you go to war, count the cost. What kind of cost should you be taking into account? Because it looks like it's fun, and I'm sure it is, but I'm sure there's also a lot of work and challenges that go with it.
Yep. So folks can go look at the LCC Comfort Dog website, and there is a link on the website to inquire for more information about signing up for a dog. I don't know what their wait time is now, because these dogs go through about 2,000 hours worth of training before they are assigned to a church. And so they go through rigorous training themselves to prepare for their role. And so there's generally a backlog. And so there's usually a waiting period. We were initially told our waiting period might be 9 to 12 months, maybe 18 on the outside, and then COVID hit. So we waited a bit longer than the normal time frame.
Right.
So I would certainly recommend checking out the Lutheran Church Charities website. They've got links there for the Comfort Dog Ministries and current costs that are associated with that, as well as wait times and things can be found there. But certainly we are always available, as are the other teams across the country, are always eager to talk about our dogs and the work that we do and provide any pointers and tips.
Yeah. And then how many people do you have who basically house Soloman? Because I know he doesn't necessarily stay at your house, but how many people are involved in kind of the handle team care for him?
So he has a primary caregiver who, in our case, lives in New Kent County, has a little bit of acreage. And so there's that gentleman and his wife. And then there's two other couples that will house him on occasion as secondary and sort of tertiary, if you will, caregivers. And some of those folks actually double as handlers, too. They can do both. So there's about 6 that are caregivers, and then Some of them double as handlers, and then I would say, is it 8 handlers we have?
So our team is comprised of handlers and caregivers as the primary core team. There are approximately 11 people on that team. And so that includes the handlers who go actively out on visits to meet with people. Then we have, as Philip mentioned, our caregivers. And so some of the caregivers are not active handlers. So one of our backup caregivers, her husband, is not an active handler. He generally does not go out on visits, but he's trained so that he can work with Soloman in the home. So that comprises our 11 people. But we also have a whole host of other people who help with Soloman. When Soloman goes out on a visit, he always goes with 2 people. One is the handler, and one is what we call a paw partner or a ministry partner. And that individual is there to help safeguard the environment. So when we go into a nursing home, for example, Soloman does have a kryptonite. He loves tissues. And so, or cloth items. So during COVID, masks were a challenge for us. He also loves children with stuffed animals. And so.
What dog doesn't?
Right. He is, like we said, he's still a dog. We work with him regularly on that. But our partners will go in the room and just kind of do a visual sweep and make sure there's nothing that might be a distraction. Or if we're visiting someplace where someone may have a personal pet, we want to ensure that those pets are secured, not because we're concerned about Soloman behaving poorly. We don't know how that animal is going to react to a new dog coming into their space. And so to protect everyone, the partner may go in and suggest that that animal be put in a separate room. So we have, probably 7 or 8 other paw partners who get involved with that as well. Then we also have a team of bakers, a team of writers. I have someone who does all of our correspondence for us. So she took that for me, which is a huge blessing. And then within our team, we recently structured so that we have folks who have very specific roles. And so we've got one woman who serves basically my right-hand man. I could not do this ministry without Terry. She's amazing. We have Philip's wife, Dawn, thank you.
It's early in the morning. We have not had enough coffee yet.
Dawn is an amazing woman who does our training. She is leading our training for us, and I'm thankful for her. We have another woman on the team who's going to pick up our spiritual learning, and so making sure that we're spiritually fed and working on that for the team. And so we have lots of people who are picking up different responsibilities to keep the team moving and functioning efficiently, and to keep us all on task. And we also brought in Sally recently to manage our calendar, because Soloman's calendar gets pretty busy, and ensuring we have somebody assigned for each visit.
So it sounds like if you're going to engage in this kind of ministry, you need a lot of hands on deck, because there's a lot of things you probably wouldn't even think about.
And it's a time commitment. For the handlers, they're required to work with Soloman 3 to 5 hours a week, and that includes visits. So if we don't have visits, they're required to do training with him. Our paw partners, while we don't have a time requirement, we definitely require them to keep up training, and we do special training once a quarter for them. So that they're kept up to date on all the things that we're doing with Soloman. And then we have monthly meetings.
That's great. That's great. Hey, as we get ready to wrap up this podcast conversation, let me ask you, so we may have some ministries that are thinking, hey, boy, we'd sure like to get involved. What kind of advice would you give to a church or a ministry that's thinking of starting a comfort dog ministry?
Well, as you said, it's a very involved ministry, and I think you have to. We sort of had, in a way, we had benefit of time because of COVID, so I think it took time for things to percolate and people to be involved. But you really need a commitment, and I think a conversation with your congregation and to try to identify and almost recruit people to the ministry. So I think it's important to get a really good base of volunteers to do this. But the paw partners, the handlers, the trainers, it takes a while to make it happen. So I think, and patience. I think, we had to have a lot of patience, but it is a time commitment. So this isn't just you write a check. This isn't you just show up for something on a Saturday. I mean, this takes a little more time. So I think if you're realistic with folks and you're very genuine about what it is, what it isn't, and give the expectations out and try to identify and recruit people who really have a heart for this, that would be just my advice. And then from an administrative standpoint, I think the church itself has to really understand the cost. Things like veterinary bills and grooming, food. I mean, those are very basic things, but they do add up. Travel, all those types of things. So.
And that was what I was going to mention, is that you really need to take into account the cost. We are incredibly blessed in that our veterinary care is donated through Jolly Pond Veterinary. Happily love Jolly Pond. Bonnie Brown is amazing, and she does wonderful things for us, and she really puts her heart and soul into Soloman. And then our grooming, we have to pay for that. We also... our time and travel. And that's really a big piece of the budget. If we go on a deployment, you have to pay for that travel. If we go to training in Chicago, there's travel expenses, whether it's airfare, mileage, hotels, things like that. The folks who follow this podcast know Kevin, and Kevin, I can quote him as saying, we were his most expensive ministry. And it's a lot of hidden costs after you look at the veterinary care and the primary care of Soloman. It's the mileage, and our team donates so much. I am overwhelmed with how much this team donates to Team Soloman. But if we were to actually charge back for mileage or incidentals that we buy for Soloman, whether it's a new feeding bowl or a new tennis ball, or we purchased a ramp to get him in and out of the car. And so, little things like that start to add up over time. And so there is a huge expense related to it. But one of the biggest lessons they taught us, especially in my initial training, is that amazing things happen with this ministry, and the money appears, and I can't explain it. We have received numerous very generous donations that have put us in a very good position to be able to serve our community. And you meet people and you come across opportunities you never would have dreamed were possible through this ministry, and they just come to be. So while finances are definitely a consideration, I don't consider them a worry, but they're definitely something you need to plan for.
Yeah. And so you talked about kind of some of the things to the cost account and the challenges. What would you say are the opportunities and the benefits of doing this kind of ministry?
Well, honestly, the outreach to the community and being a partner in the community. He's a very visible public face, honestly, of the Creator and of King of Glory as well, but of the gospel. And yes, he's not carrying a Bible on him, but he carries that grace and that peace for folks, and it's a way of sort of bridging that. So I think that's the opportunity with him, is to show the face of God in a way it's not proselytizing, it's not beating people over the head. It's a subtler kind of witness, but I think it's almost even more powerful than anything we could say or do with the dog. So.
And there's nothing to describe what you see when a child or an adult buries their face in his fur, and they're using that moment to breathe, to take a moment and really feel God's love around them. There's really no way to describe that moment and how it feels to witness it.
That's awesome. Well, very good. Hey, we want to thank you both for being here and joining us for this Called2B podcast. If any of our listening or viewing audience want to reach out to you to find out how to bring Soloman to their organization, their event, or maybe they just have some questions to ask you about Comfort Dog Ministry and want to find out a little bit more about your experience, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So the easiest thing, it's easy to remember, is our email address is just comfort.dog@KOGVA.org. That's King of Glory, Virginia.org. So KOGVA.org, or go to our Facebook page, it's Soloman Comfort Dog on Facebook. If you look him up, you can send us a message there and it will be routed over to me.
Wonderful. Well, hey, thank you both for joining us for this Everyday Believer. Thank you for your ministry, and we thank you for bringing Soloman into studio as well. For all of our listening and viewing audience, we hope and pray that this was a blessing to you. Comfort Dog Ministry is a great way to engage with people really in a kind of a soft sell. I mean, literally the fur and his wonderful spirit of a comfort dog, just to engage in a community at points of need, of celebrations and joys, of hurts and pains, and to be able through a comfort dog to be able to be the presence of Jesus and to share the comfort of the gospel with those in their times. We want to encourage all of you, if you've been blessed by this podcast, please, again, like and share it with somebody who you think would be blessed. Keep these folks in your prayer as well as all Comfort Dog Ministries and the incredible ministry that they do for the sake of Christ and his kingdom. As always, we want to thank the Southeastern District and Malin for their generous grants that made this podcast possible. And with that, we want to wish you all God Church's blessings, and we'll catch you next time for the Called2B Podcast. Take care, everybody.